We are bombarded with contradictory information from unreliable sources. Who can you trust? With the new Decoding Seafood podcast, you can dive into the depths of one of the most trendy but also misunderstood food options. Learn from the perspectives of seafood experts, foodies, chefs, pop culture influencers, scientists, and more about the bounties of eating blue foods from our oceans. Decoding Seafood demystifies each layer of seafood so you can separate fact, fiction, and opinion for yourself. With oceans making up 70% of our planet, you can feel good about eating more blue foods and join the blue revolution. Subscribe to Decoding Seafood today, brought to you by Moe.
Welcome to another episode of Decoding Seafood by Moe. I'm your host, George Duran, and today we have a truly special guest with us. And before we dive into our conversation with our surprise culinary legend, allow me to share a snippet of my own gastronomic journey. Born to Armenian parents who themselves grew up in Beirut, Lebanon, and later emigrated to Caracas, Venezuela, where I was born and raised, my early years were a smorgasbord of diverse cuisines and languages. This eclectic background naturally led me to hone my skills in Paris, France, in the art of French cuisine. Now, despite my travels, I hadn't discovered a culinary beacon here in the United States in the last 40 years that I've been living here until I encountered the ingenious Chris Kimball and his groundbreaking venture, Milk Street. Chris Kimball is a name that resonates deeply within our culinary world. With decades of experience as an award-winning food writer, television personality, and entrepreneur, Chris has significantly influenced how we approach cooking and food. He's the founder of Milk Street, a multimedia company dedicated to exploring the bold and vibrant flavors from around the globe. And today we'll delve into Chris's philosophy on cooking, the importance of culinary education, and how he continues to innovate and inspire both seasoned chefs and home cooks alike. So grab a cup of coffee or matcha tea, settle in, and join us for an enlightening conversation with the one and only Chris Kimball. Chris, welcome to the show.
Well, that was some introduction. So.
I have to start with fireworks and get it going from here. It's
all
uphill from here, I promise you.
Good.
Chris, I want to start off by saying that when I speak to people about you, I have to say that you may be the luckiest man on the planet. In my opinion, this is my perspective, to be able to experience the best flavors of the world, to get paid for it, obviously, to build this empire, and to pretty much use this medium that we have as a stage to educate others. How did you get into world cuisine? How did that form in your head, and why?
Well, first of all, you should never watch the sausage being made. So it looks sexier and more exciting than it is. But actually, as jobs go, it's a good job. This is back almost 10 years ago. Well, back in 1980, when I started Cook's Magazine, we had a meeting in the Upper East Side of New York. Florence Fabricant from the New York Times is there, a bunch of other food people. And we announced to ourselves this was going to be the age of American cuisine was about to start, and which was true. That's what happened. And then about 10 years ago, I sat down and was thinking about this and said, well, the next phase is everything from all over the world is going to become accessible. You can buy the ingredients overnight, on Amazon or whatever. And restaurants were starting to serve, not just real Mexican food, but all the different, regions of Mexico. And Indian food wasn't just Northern Indian food. Now it was everything else. And so the entire world was going to get mashed up in a lot of interesting ways. And that was going to come from the restaurants, but then get into the home. The home cook was going to start on this journey as well. And the second thing I thought was, most of our cooking, at least for me when I grew up here, was based loosely on French, sort of Northern European standards, right? And that meant good ingredients, time and heat and technique, right? So that was no longer worked as well because the ingredients we're dealing with weren't as good as they were 150 years ago in France. And two, many other cultures use chilies and spices and, fermented sauces and everything else. So instead of slowly developing flavor with, 3 pounds of leeks, whatever, you could start with big flavor. And so the entire philosophy of how to cook in many other places in the world where it's totally different. It's not just new recipes, new ingredients, but how you think about cooking was different, right? So that was exciting to me because those other ingredients and techniques and pairings of ingredients and flavors really lends itself to the modern style of cooking, which is big flavors, start with big flavors, and you can end up with all sorts of different things relatively quickly that are pretty amazing compared to the boeuf bourguignon, I used to make in the 70s, which I love, but you either get very drunk or very frustrated after the 8 hours it took to make it. So yeah, that's what I thought was going to happen. And I think, in fact, that's what's happened. Yeah.
It's interesting you say ingredients. And again, I've been living here for many years now, as you have, and traveled around the world, eaten around the world. I was just reading your editor's note from your recent issue of Milk Street magazine, and you have a great quote. It says, "The good things in life do not need dressing up." And you're talking about the simplicity of ingredients. But one of the problems I've had since living here is access to the good basic ingredients. I was in Spain a few months ago, and literally walking into any market, even a supermarket, the quality of the fish alone was like, you just can't find it here, or at least it's very difficult to find it here in this country. Why are we missing these like simple but amazing ingredients? And also, why is it so unaffordable at this rate? What does it say about our culture? And I know we're shifting. You're talking about a great shifting. You've gambled on it and you've done great with that. But a jarred chili peppers is very different than the fresh chili peppers that you can barely find at your local supermarket.
Well, I would disagree that it's not affordable. I would say one of the things American agriculture has done so successfully is to, back in the 70s, people thought by 2000, millions of people would be starving to death every year because lack of food. That was entirely wrong. Modern agriculture has figured out how to double or triple yields per acre. And so in China, for example, they thought there'd be mass starvation. Well, that didn't happen. So I think what the food suppliers have done a great job of is producing food at very low cost. The average American spends 6% of their income on food, as opposed to 25 or 30% in many other countries, right? So our cost is low. Which the trade-off is, if you want strawberries in January and you want inexpensive chicken is going to be inexpensive for a reason, which is it's not going to be very good. And so that was the trade-off. The trade-off was volume and price, and then quality. And so if you walk into a high-end supermarket, it's going to look great, right? I mean, the carrots look great, and the cilantro looks great, and the whatever, bok choy looks great. But if you close your eyes and taste it, you're not going to get much flavor. So that was the trade-off, feeding the world versus having great food. And now, the distribution system is, very little of your food's produced within 25 miles from your home, which is a whole nother topic. So,
Right.
I mean, the tomato, the thing that drives me crazy is, even I've been to Israel, I've been to Romania, I've been all over the world. I still haven't gotten a good tomato anywhere. I'm sorry. I mean,
Right.
Israel goes like, we have great tomatoes. Yeah, but you probably export them all or something. I don't know what you do, but I didn't get them. I mean, I have great food there, but
Yeah.
so, there's a lot of reasons for that, but it's basically because consumers are not willing to, I guess, they're not going to buy a tomato in the supermarket and go, this tastes awful.
Yeah.
This is not a tomato. It's an orange orb of some kind. If consumers said, look, I'm not buying this, I'll buy the good stuff, that would change food production overnight.
Yeah.
But consumers are quite happy to buy lousy tomatoes and other things.
But isn't that
So-
because the consumers are just don't have an educated palate, or don't have, this country doesn't have the thousands of years of culinary evolution like the European countries or even countries like Mexico. This is a relatively newer country. And
Yeah,
if the consumers aren't educated and they don't know what a good tomato tastes like, how are they supposed to say, I'm not buying this tomato?
well, I half agree. First of all, if you look at what's happening in other countries, including Japan, if you go to a 7-Eleven in Japan, in Tokyo, there's a lot of, junk food in there. I mean, too. So
Yes.
other people their diets are being affected by modern industrial food production. So they're going down the same rat hole that we've been going down for a long time. Secondly, it wasn't that long ago where people where people made apples from local apples and they used 3 or 4 different varieties and it was great. And now everyone makes them with Granny Smiths or whatever they use, or Granny Smiths is one of the worst apples ever invented. It stands up to baking, but it has almost no flavor. So, we have a history in this country of at least a couple hundred years of having locally grown food and tasting that. And so I think the great thing about America and the worst thing about America is we change quickly. So we went from 1900, Jell-O was invented, Frosted Flakes, all the other stuff, cornflakes. So starting then everything changed into sort of mass production. And the reason that worked is because mostly women were spending 7 hours a day cooking and cleaning the coal stove and this and the other thing. It was a very difficult life. And so convenience and freeing up time was, even back in the 1880s, was at a premium. So that's what this food, revolution did. It gave people a lot of time back. And so we fell into that. The good news is, however, today, in the last 10 or 20 years, there has been a movement for local food. There has been a movement for quality, and some percentage of the population is now interested in that. And I think we're going in the right direction as a country. Overall, if you look at obesity rates, they're not going down, unfortunately, but there are some indications that there's something to look forward to in the future. But I interviewed Jamie Oliver a few months ago, and his answer was it's going to get worse before it gets better, which may be true. But yeah, I think you're right, though. I was in Calabria recently, southern Italy, and they're cooking the same food they cooked 100 years ago, and it's all local, almost all local. And it's not fancy, it's just delicious. And they know the difference between a good tomato and a bad tomato, So you're right, in part, that long history, I think, is helpful. The good news is we can change, I don't know if you're old enough to remember, back in the 1970s, let's say, if you went to a mid-sized town in America and tried to get a good meal, it was hard. You can go to almost any town in this country right now and get a good meal.
Sure.
And that's a huge, huge revolution. And so it's not just San Francisco and LA and New York and Boston, whatever.
Small towns.
You go to small towns and you can get good food. And I think that's an amazing testament to what America can do when we set our minds to it.
Yeah. Do you think the government is at fault a little bit for how we access food here, but more importantly, how they set the standards for good quality food? And I'll give you a great example. I remember living in France and going to all these wine regions, and the government, the AOC or the what was called agriculture or whatever it was, they were so strict on when they could harvest the grapes for the wines on certain regions, or they had rules about putting wood chips like the California wines do to add smokiness. And a lot of those rules are right out the door. There are colorings and preservatives and just wasted. And I understand the industrialization of food. We have to feed a large population. That's really important. But at the same time, how is it that Europe has done such a good job of being able to produce mass amounts of food without sort of poisoning the population?
Well, I think America, to give credit where credit's due, I think we invented big ag, if you want to put it that way. I mean, we more than any other place in the world, we were at the forefront of increasing yields per acre. So Europe is a very small place, relatively speaking, and we export food like nobody else does, right? So I think that's part of the reason. You're right. I mean, olive oil on the shelves in Europe, inspectors will come along and actually take a bottle off the shelf and check the acidity level, right? because there are rules about that. And that's why a lot of stuff gets shipped over here that's not the best quality, because right now there's no enforcement of that. There's not even, as I understand it, enforcement on the lines. If you're butchering cattle, for example, in a slaughterhouse, there are certain places the inspectors can go, but it's not on the line itself. So, yes, Europe is much more controlled about that, and about hormones and this GMO and other things. That's true. But yeah, we have not done a great job of that. I mean, when the pizza sauce, tomato sauce with 2 tablespoons or something is considered a vegetable serving,
Right, for the schools.
and I think they tried to get it up to a 1/4 cup, and
Right.
they never went through. I'm not
No.
sure maybe it was 1/2 cup. I don't remember. But yeah, okay, guys, really, I mean, ketchup, is, really, this is vegetable. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think the government, but I went to Washington years ago, and I sat down with one of the senators, I won't mention his name. And I said, look, I really want to do something I started something called Parents Against Junk Food, and I was going to talk about, lobbying and everything else. And he just said, he was from a big agricultural state. And he said, look, let me just explain how it works. There's hundreds of millions of dollars of money from the industry. And so to change this is going to be hard, I think. But on the other hand, look, Americans want their blueberries in March.
Yeah.
If you actually ate within 25 miles of your home, and I'm in Vermont a lot of the time, I can tell you that December through April is going to be parsnips and potatoes and meat. It's meat and potatoes, and that's the only 2 things that are available. I don't have avocados. I don't have, I'm not going to I'll have canned tomatoes, but not fresh tomatoes. So, the fact of the matter is that's the world I would like to live in, at least philosophically,
Right.
but it's not going to happen. And all consumers demand you walk into a supermarket. You can't walk into a supermarket in February and have 6 things available.
Yes.
5 kinds of potatoes and rutabaga or whatever it's going to be. So,
We'll be back after this break.
Moe's salmon comes ready to cook, ready to grill, ready to season, or pre-seasoned and ready to eat. And an assortment of flavors for an assortment of people. Moe's salmon.
There's no doubt. I was, in fact, my wife is from Vermont, and we were just up there last week, and we went strawberry picking at the peakness of strawberry picking. And there was something to be said to experience the sweet strawberries from the fields directly once a year, because that's kind of where it happens, versus this all year long strawberries that have no flavor to them. But speaking to a tomato grower many years back, they said Americans would rather have pink tasteless tomatoes all year long than the heirloom tomatoes during the heat of August, and that's who we are. And so we have to kind of work with that. And one thing that Milk Street and yourself do really well is educating the consumers, having a platform to really truly educate the consumers. And I want to change gears a little bit about meat and talk about a little bit about media, and what is it that's helped you navigate using your medium, numerous types of mediums, and how has that evolved in the last 20, 10, 5, 1 year, and constantly evolving? And how do you have to always keep up with the evolution of technology, our social media now, all this stuff? You have to be on top of it to be able to communicate to your audience, right?
Well, there's good news and bad news.
Okay, here we go.
The bad news is years ago in the 80s and 90s, et cetera, before, social media, et cetera, business was simple because we would use direct mail marketing. That was what we had. And you send out 3 or 4 campaigns a year, and you'd mail 8 or 10 million pieces a year. And that's how you communicate with people and sell subscriptions, for example. So that was easy to do. Today, as you just rightly pointed out, Facebook just a month ago changed their algorithm, and it's like every time things start, it's like the car's running well, it's getting good mileage, there's air in the tires, and then something else happens. And so it is a daily literally an hour by hour process of managing your business. And clearly social media, although I said dumb things years ago, like, who needs social media? But don't quote me. It turns out everybody does.
Yeah.
And how you communicate with people through social media is really important. I mean, I think the key issue is for any brand, even if you're a brand of one, is being consistent with your brand and doing things that reflect your values and your passion in a way that's consistent, and you're not, leaning over your skis trying to, for example, all of a sudden, people want to eat chicken breast, not chicken thighs, so let's go do chicken breast recipes. No, do what you want to do that you're passionate about. Don't, everyone's doing Bass cheesecake. I did that a few months ago on social media. Now everyone's doing it. It's like, okay, let's not follow trends, right? So figuring out how to do, we do radio and television and books and magazines and cooking classes and travel and everything else. All of that stuff has to be of a piece and have the same point of view and voice, right? So I think that's what's so hard now. You have so many distribution channels, so many digital choices. You have to be consistent, so people understand who you are, what you care about, and why they might be interested in getting involved. But the opportunity to make a mistake and be off-brand and not have a consistent message is 10 times more easy to be off-brand now than it was before. And then there's just the complexity of dealing with, there's TikTok and there's Amazon, there's Facebook, and there's, and there's YouTube and there's Instagram and all these others. And everyone has its own rules, and it's complicated.
It's very complicated. I started in radio when we had the analog reel-to-reel machines and the carts. And I oversaw at a very young age here in New York, the #1 radio market, the transition to digital, and all the older folks were just absolutely against it. But as a young kid who had just graduated NYU from mass media communications, I was excited to see this transition. And once they saw how easy it was to edit in digital format, all the spots or the radio commercials, whatever we had to do, then they started saying, oh, well, there's a benefit to this. The one medium that to this day, it's incredible that I still see it. It's the medium of the cookbook. It's the ultimate analog medium. And are you surprised that it still exists? And how do you feel about this? Because it's nothing but ADHD out there, and people want to swipe rather than, flip the page. Your cookbook here, 365, which is extraordinary. I mean, I can sit here and read it on and on, but I find myself sometimes trying to zoom into the picture with my fingers on the page. Because it's just out of the modern habit. How have cookbooks evolved today to what they are?
It's not just cookbooks. I mean, podcasts, radio shows. Yeah. We have,
right.
That's my favorite thing we do, and it is, it's just a radio show. We have actually through public radio, we have a radio show, and then we have a podcast. That goes back to FDR, with Fireside Chats. So I take great pleasure in the fact that medium still is resonant and works. I think it's a better medium than visual, because you're more engaged when you listen, right? So if you have to think about it a little bit, then I think it's the more interesting experience. Same thing is true with cookbooks. I mean, I remember 20, 30 years ago, everybody saying, well, no one's going to do cookbooks, paper, no one's going to put ink on paper, cut down trees, process them, slap ink on it, sell it in a bookstore. Except that it's by far the best way to cook, because you can cook off your phone. I've done it. You can cook off a computer screen. You can print out a recipe from a website. You can do that. But a cookbook does allow you to browse, right, and get ideas. And that's really the important thing. If you're on the internet, browsing is it could take you 8 hours to browse for a leek recipe, because you see this, you see that, you don't know which one. I think the great thing about a cookbook is if you trust somebody, if you like Jamie Oliver, right, or whomever you like, and you like his recipes and his style, you buy one of his books, you're comfortable, there's a certain quality there, and you like that style, then you can browse through those recipes. You don't have to flip from 28,000 people you've never heard of, to find a recipe. So I think there is something to be said for paper in it. Also, if you get sauce or
Yes.
stock on paper, it's okay. It's
Yeah.
not your phone. And you also can move it around.
Yeah.
You stuck with a computer that's a certain place. So for a lot of reasons. And also the other thing is, the problem with a phone screen is it's small. A whole page, you can flip the page, you can see the whole recipe at one time, or go, if it says see page 129 for the pie crust recipe, you can flip to 129. The access of the information is better than on a phone, in fact. So my mother had a rule, which is, which method is going to get you what you want faster. And I would say a cookbook is a better system for cooking than a screen.
Do you mind if I agree and disagree as well?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Because I
Do
agree,
both.
the physical medium is wonderful, and to be able to sit down and browse through the recipes through a cookbook, it's just a whole different medium. It feels, very natural, very analog. But often I find myself, if you have the right source, and let's say you go to Milk Street's website, and I'm able to hone down with the ingredients that I have,
Yeah.
and let's say I do want to do something with leeks, and I type in leeks, but then you can also narrow down those parameters by saying quick meals, stewed, or whatever medium you want to use to cook with it. That digital world for me allows me and my ADHD, I'm sorry to say this, to be able to truly hone in quicker, faster, immediately as to what I want to cook versus browsing through the pork chapter, the beef chapter, all this stuff.
But it's
And
not
then the
either.
mediums have also changed to the iPad. The iPad is relatively large also. It's allowing me to really engage. I don't know, there's something about the digital medium that's helped me. Again, this is the more of a modern head to be able to hone in on the recipe. Go on, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but it's not either or.
No.
Look, I use my own database, my own website all the time. I cook a lot with an Instant Pot actually in Vermont for a variety of reasons, because I'm out doing something else. And we have a book, dedicated to that. But I just go online and just pick up those recipes and go through them. I print it out and go to the store. So sure. But I think the point is that ink on paper still, look, everyone said there'd be no more books because everyone would be reading, the paper screen from Amazon or whatever. Well, I went through 4 or 5 of those devices. I hate them.
Right.
I want to read a book. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I don't find that a rewarding experience. There's something about it I find extremely unrewarding. So if I want a history book about Rome or whatever I like to read about, I want the book.
Right.
It's also easier in my eyes. I like the paper. It's like that Apple ad that got pulled, a book called Crush. Did you see that? It was taking all the things like, a guitar, all the things in life we love, and put them on a big steel slab and then crushed it down, and they lifted up and there was an iPad, and it was the world's dumbest commercial because you just destroyed everything I care about and put it into a screen. Well, I kind of like my 12 guitars in my basement. Thank you very much. Please don't destroy them, So people that's why cooking is the last thing you can probably do with your hands, which is a craft, which is also something people can enjoy. You can't fix your car anymore because you don't have $100,000 worth of computer equipment. You can't fix you can, but most people don't know how to fix their plumbing or rewire or something, or fix their gutters. Those days are over. So cooking is tactile, and that's why digital is great for certain things, but it doesn't give you the tactile experience that I think people like.
Do you think AI is going to change our culinary landscape in any way? Looking at where it is now and how it could evolve in 5 years, 10 years?
Sure. The question is, I think the problem with AI is going to be that if you have content that is easily accessible through AI, you're in deep trouble. If you have content like we do, we actually travel the world to come up with this content and put it behind a paywall, then I think you're in better shape. But if you're just playing the traffic game, the click game, like everybody else is, then it's game over. It's just not going to work. So the other thing is, I think people underestimate the desire other people have to participate in a brand or an experience with other people they care about, that it's something that is important to them. So yeah, you can always, AI would be great at finding recipes, right?
Yeah.
I want this recipe, here are my 3 ingredients, it can't be more than an hour, and all that other stuff would be great. But, at some point, people want to be part of a brand where other people with similar interests come together. And so AI doesn't it doesn't replace the human level participation, the back and forth, the conversation. It can imitate it. That movie, years ago tried to do with the robot, but Her, whatever the movie was.
Right, Her.
Yeah, but there's the AI is going to. I think AI is going to initiate a strong reverse revolution.
Yeah.
Which is, picking up that ukulele on a Saturday night and going to your friend's house. I think there'll be a lot of people who want to get their hands dirty in the kitchen. They'll have enough of that at work,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's like it'll be hit or miss. It'll be useful for certain things, but we're still humans and we still have human needs, and AI is not going to solve that problem.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I'm glad to hear that. I feel better about that. That we'll still have that human connection with food. As we wrap up this first part of our fascinating conversation with Chris Kimball, I hope you've enjoyed the insights and stories he's shared about his incredible journey through the culinary world. But we're just getting started, folks. Tune in next week for the second part of our interview, where we'll dive even deeper into his culinary philosophies, explore more of his favorite global dishes, and uncover some surprising anecdotes you won't want to miss. So stay tuned and get ready for an even more delectable discussion in the next episode. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. I'm your host, George Duran, and this is Decoding Seafood by Moe.